Hello and welcome to The Thing About Golf, the podcast series from Golf Australia magazine, where we explore just what it is that draws people to this crazy and infuriating game. My name's Rod Murray, and each month I bring you these conversations with a member of the golf fraternity who has an interesting story to tell. If you haven't already done so, dig into the archives and listen back to some of our earlier episodes. Also, make sure to subscribe to the show on your preferred podcasting app. It is free, and it means that you'll never miss a future episode. If you'd like to get in touch with a suggestion or some feedback, you can contact me directly on Twitter at @Rod_Murray, that's MORRI, or Golf Australia magazine at GolfAustMag, GolfAustMag. You can also head to the Facebook page, just search for Golf Australia magazine, or you can get in touch by email to golf@golfaustralia.com.au. I'll put links in the show notes to each of those to make it easy for you to find us. That's enough of the homework. Let's move on to today's episode, because this one was a real treat to record. Now, I readily admit that I'm somewhat biased, but as a golfer with an interest in course architecture, the name Paul Daley is one that I've been familiar with for the best part of 2 decades. That's how long Paul's been publishing books about the subculture that is golf course design. And frankly, it's an endeavour that, as you'll hear, truly is a labour of love. Now, while I'd known about Paul's books for a long time, it's to my eternal shame that I'd never met the man. And it became increasingly evident what a mistake that was when I got to sit down with him at the Long Island Golf Club earlier this year. Paul is self-effacing, engaging, eloquent, thoughtful, but most importantly, he's knowledgeable and interesting to listen to. Now, for those who might be nervous, we do talk about a lot more than just golf course architecture, though, as you'd imagine, it does get its fair share of airtime. So sit back, and I hope you enjoy my conversation with Paul Daley. The podcast series, Paul, is called The Thing About Golf. So I guess it's a good place to start. What's the thing about golf for Paul Daley?
It's a tremendous question. It's a big,
big
broad question. The thing about golf is there's not just relaxation, enjoyment, the sociability of being with people you like, but also about being out in beautiful environments. Occasionally there might be heathland or forested, parkland, there might be dunesland, escarpments, linksland, the whole thing, just the nature's variety. But then, of course, there's the architecture, and probably my main connection, other than playing, is with my long-standing interest in the architecture related to golf.
You're quite a good player. You play to a decent standard, still to this day, I think, from memory.
You're very kind. And
I'm off 12. Everybody's a good player to me.
Look, I'm stranded on a 3 handicap and have been known to carry a fairly bulky, non-conforming putter. Non-conforming, not as far as the rules go, but it doesn't conform to my wishes.
Right, not orthodox. Understood. So you're a competent golfer. So my guess is that golf's probably been a part of your life for a good portion of your life.
As long as I can remember, from the days of when I was 5 or 6, going back to the Western District in Western Victoria, where my father was a bank manager at places like Terang, Cobden, Warrnambool, and all these places, Apollo Bay. And so wherever he went and my mum went, of course, myself and my 2 brothers and sisters, we went as well.
Mm-hmm. And was golf something was it a gift from your dad? How did golf come into your life? You can't remember a time when it wasn't there. Where did it come from?
Dad was very strategic. From very early ages, he would strategically leave a putter or a 7-iron in the hall or out in the kitchen. And, of course, I couldn't walk past without swinging or putting it. And so it quickly got into my way of everyday activities, just having a swing in the head and a chip out the back.
Yeah, which is a fantastic way to be and to grow up.
Yes.
I often wonder, Paul, the things that shape people. So we're going to come to where you are now in life as a sort of a self-publisher of golf architecture books, and there must have been a time when that would have seemed like a crazy thing to be involved in, and yet You've been doing it for some time. But the things that shape people. So I read a number of interviews and things that you've done. Your dad moved around a lot. And because golf was part of your life, whenever you moved, as is for a lot of people who travel, you'd go and join the local golf club.
Yes.
Now, I guess I wonder what role that might have played in your later interest in golf courses themselves, because, of course, for many people, their introduction to golf is at a club, and for most of their lives, they play that golf course. They don't venture much beyond.
No.
And it can be quite a shock for people like that to come across a course that is somewhat different. What do you think about that? Tease out perhaps that notion of...
Yes, I think because our family knew nothing but change and moving and going from one town to another, joining the next golf club, even before I was actually aware of any architecture, just purely given to the fun of hitting a ball. And in those days, I'd try and hit it as far as I possibly could without thinking any refinery. But... somehow the die must have been cast that, for instance, at Apollo Bay there was the old third hole which went along the coast, and to the right of the fairway was about 250 metres of fairway, and in typically parallelism there was all these sausage-like holes, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, because Apollo Bay is and has been laid out on such a very small plot that somehow they squeezed 9 holes in. But this third hole, it used to strike me that the further you go to the right to avoid the cliff on the left, the more progressively you would be blinded into the green, and then there'd be an out of bounds behind, which is terribly unfair, of course.
Of course.
And
our favourite word in golf.
Yes.
We'll come to that.
Not that I truly believe that golf should be fair, and I'm an old traditions plays it as lies, and don't expect too much, and don't look for fairness where fairness shouldn't exist, but that's a whole different topic.
It is.
But anyway, so that third hole really got into me, and it for many years I pondered how they would design that hole. And then I guess there was another example at Cobden, where Cobden, another very small plot of land, had 9 holes crammed into it. And there was the 6th hole, which I used to call Snake Gully. You'd keep crossing this gully, and I remember one time coming across a monster snake, and it scared the heck out of me. But in fact, it set
That's
up...
the correct response, by the way, Paul, is to be terrified of a snake.
Yes, and on the other side of the course there was a railway line, and so even then I was thinking about the marvellous way that the architect would have you climbing over this creek time after time, even in a little 9-hole course. So yeah, little things were starting to get into my mind, and this is well before the age of 20. I was only probably 15 at that time in Cobden.
What about the role of golf as part of community then, for somebody who moves around a lot? I've interviewed many people in the past who travel for their work, and golf becomes the first and most important point of contact with the rest of the community. When you're new in town,
yes,
it can be an awful place to be, can't it?
Correct. I think if you're in a small place, if you join the local cricket club, football club or golf club, you virtually know the whole town within 3 or 4 weeks, and it is a meeting point. There's a lot of loneliness out there, and so not only do avid golfers and avid sports people join these clubs, sometimes it's a beautiful way for people to get together.
Indeed. So you've subconsciously, I'm guessing, sort of developed an interest in architecture and been exposed to different courses. Do all golf courses, or almost all golf courses, have something architecturally to recommend them, do you think?
It's interesting you say that. I've never struck a golf course yet that doesn't have at least one standout holes. There can be some very poorly designed golf courses that may be poorly routed, make no sense, and yet somewhere in the middle there'll be an absolute gem of a hole. So I'm yet
often by accident.
Yeah, at times by accident, yes, and often by accident. So I'm yet to see a golf course that is either of no redeeming feature or cannot be redeemed. And of course, another topic again, but some of and we might see more of this in the future, is that there was a trend started in America some years back called a start over, where they looked at a course that had been, say, poorly designed on magnificent free draining sandy subsoil with all the geological advantages and tremendous vegetation, but was poorly designed. What would happen if you actually, quote unquote, blew the thing up and started again. 100 years later, what could that course be? And It got some appeal a few years ago in America, and for one reason or another, that's died down a little bit, but it may well come back in the future.
It feels like, we'll go down this rabbit hole a bit later, it feels to me like the future of golf course design will be repairing and improving existing courses rather than starting new courses. There'll be a lot less new courses and a lot more, what can we do with our existing assets? And particularly true in public golf, I think, and that will be to the good of the game.
That's a spot on, and because land is finite, suburbia keeps growing, boundaries are finite, and already many golf courses are in magnificent environments where they had the pick of the land many years ago before suburbia encroached. I think also, of course, we'll see a lot more 9, 12 and 15 hole layouts coming up. That's becoming more evident in Europe. And so it's fascinating. And that's one of the things about architecture is it never actually stays still. Golf course architecture, being living, breathing organisms, there's always something to attend to, both as an architect but also as a writer and editor and publisher. Like yourself, you in your magazine, your podcast, there's always some fresh information or a new angle to look at an old thing.
These two questions are somewhat... Actually, I'll ask them one at a time. There will be people who've started to listen to this and already said to themselves, golf course architecture, I can't stand it, and turned it off.
Yes.
What do you say to those people, those golfers who say they don't have an interest in the architecture? A, how do people come to that opinion, you think? And B, are those of us who are interested in it, the term golf snob gets thrown around a lot at people who are interested in architecture. Is it partly our fault that we have that image problem? What can we do to fix it, and why would it be good for the game if we had more people interested in that side of the game?
It's a fair comment. We perhaps have not been as good at explaining it in the terms that the everyday golfer, the weekend warrior, can appreciate. And I think one of the areas we've failed in is to point out that if the average golfer on 15, 16, 20 would actually pay a little bit more attention to the architecture and try and get into the mind of the designer or the designers and look at their intent and see the way holes are rarely straight. They tend to go a bit to the right, a bit to the left, and in some instances they go a bit both ways. There's a joke in there, Rod, but I won't touch that.
Okay. After we turn the mics off, you can fill me in, yes.
But actually, if we could communicate to the weekend warrior that by taking more notice of the architecture, they actually would knock off 3 or 4 shots from their score, because the primary reason that most golfers, club golfers, come out is for A, routine, enjoyment, exercise. Some of them may have been under doctor's orders, get out there or otherwise your next coronary is coming. The sociability factor, and of course we all know that there are some golfers who purely play to get to the 18th green, to get into the 19th hole and down 5 pots. Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong at all.
That's as long as they can drive safely or perhaps get alternative driving, say a taxi, and these days Uber. So there are so many different reasons that people play golf. Architecture, without doubt, and I set my book print run against this known, or in Donald Rumsfeld speak, a known, is that there might be between 1 and 5 golfers per club worldwide who actually play purely and simply or primarily to enjoy the architecture. So these people within each club are possibly viewed, as oddities, 2 heads, and so it's up to them in some ways at a local level to help spread the news that, hey, architecture, it's not a thing, it's not elitist, it's not a snobby thing. It's there for everyone to enjoy and to appreciate.
It's always struck me, I've overused this line, but whenever I encounter people who say, I have no interest in architecture, my first question is, do you have a favourite golf hole?
Yes.
No golfer can answer no. And so by default, every golfer has an interest in architecture, doesn't there? Yes. If you like one hole more than others, there has to be a reason.
Correct. Correct, yes.
And that's it's a somewhat confrontational way to make the point. It doesn't probably help advance the discussion at all. What about that second point of the importance of architecture to the game? Even for those who don't take an interest in architecture, most will enjoy a round at a course like Royal Melbourne, which you've told me is your favourite, because of the architectural questions it asks. Than they will perhaps at a public golf. Very few golfers could play at Albert Park and Royal Melbourne and say they enjoyed both equally.
Yes.
So the importance of architecture to the game, even if people don't appreciate it, is the game healthier if you make the courses better and more interesting?
It is better because people will enjoy if they're routed correctly, if the journey that the architect can present to the golfers to get them around a set distance that changes from every golf club in a cohesive manner, that has to be to the enjoyment of golfers. It has to make the game better.
Let's come back to you because, of course, the reason I wanted to talk to you is because you've been publishing golf course architecture books for... since late 90s, early 2000s?
About 2002.
Okay. How many have you done in total?
Well, there's now the 7th volume is coming out shortly of golf architecture. There's another one called Favourite Holes by Design. I did a book with Keith Cutton, Evolution of Golf Course Design. Thank you. And there's been others, say 9 or 10.
9 or 10.
And I've worked with other people on their books as well, with Ross Perrott and Kim Baker on golf courses of the Mornington Peninsula, and done some work with Gary Lisbon with his. He's done 2 or 3, but the very first one, Great Golf Down Under, and one of the favourite books I've done was with John Green, Dr. John Green from Royal Melbourne, historian archivist there on the golf courses of Royal Melbourne. That's I thought that was a fairly important book, and
it's a spiritual home of great golf in Australia, isn't it, Robert? It's a very special place in world golf, and certainly in Australia.
It's only real crime in the scheme of things as being Australian and not American, because I'm quite convinced that whilst I would possibly put the East course as the 3rd best in Australia, with the West as the best course, if it was American, for instance, if it was elsewhere, it may well be considered in the top 3.
36-hole complexes?
The actual West course itself.
Just the West, yeah.
The composite itself, as far as rating that, would I think also be in the top 3 as well. Because there's some things are set in stone, concrete, like mafia boots at the bottom of the harbour. Pine Valley is immovable. Cypress Point is immovable. Shinnecock Hills is immovable. Did I say Cypress Point? I'm having a senior moment.
You might have mentioned Cypress Point. That's okay.
And so on and so on. Muirfield, and there's and hopefully Royal Dornoch is immovable. So how does someone and then of course Sandhills, which started the great, rebirth of golf, organic golf, destination golf.
Authentic, I think, is the word we use. The young people are woke and authentic, I think.
Authentic.
Is the word, and that makes sense, doesn't it? Authentic.
Authentic, yeah. And it's obviously the poster child for minimalist golf. Although it's interesting, people have the wrong feeling about minimalist golf, thinking they just might move a little teaspoon of to quote, say, Tom Doak.
Out there with a spade. Yes, no.
The minimalists, whilst that's their preference, when they need to move, they move heaven and earth. They move heavily. But their preference is not to, but they won't shy away from it if they have to. And elsewhere, they tread lightly, reducing the footprint. So... as far as the ratings go, as far as Royal Melbourne, if it's never going to happen because it's Australian, and we're only musing here, but so I personally think it's the best course. It's certainly the best course I've ever seen. I have not played Cypress or Pine Valley, so I can't comment. And photos are very can be deceiving.
Photos are wonderful, but I feel like they're always They're like a high-sugar food. They don't really satisfy. They taste good, but it's not very satisfying to look at photos of golf courses. I love to look at photos of golf courses, but there's a lack of satisfaction. You want to go there. That's what you want.
You want to go there. You want to
see it in 3D and smell it and feel it and touch it.
And they can never tell the full story. So anyway, Royal Melbourne, we love it, and
just on the rating
long
question,
may it live.
Paul, I feel like we get that wrong too. We want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Really, I think what we mean is top 10.
Top 10, yes.
Top 20.
Yeah, actually, top
30.
I'd go along with what you say. In fact, I've spoken to Mike Clayton about this in the past, and I think...
he's got very few views on this sort of stuff, so that would have been a short conversation, no doubt.
Yeah. I think once you, to say something's the 29th course or the 30th, it's academic.
Of course,
it
makes no sense.
And you don't have to be academic type to acknowledge it's academic. No. So I think talk in terms of, top tier, second tier, third tier. Take Tea Tree Gully, for instance, in South Australia. It's a very good course, but it could never hope to compete with, say, Royal Adelaide, Kooyonga, so on and so on. The big four over there, Glenelg and the Grange. You list them all there. So you might say Tea Tree is towards the top of the second tier. It's a nice way to say it. It's not saying, Tea Tree is the 6th, 7th or 8th, 9th, 10th best course. No. Talk in terms of tier, or in the top 100, a bracket between, say, 1 and 10, and then, say, 11 and 20.
I think you'll still get discussion, won't you?
There will never be agreement.
There'll never
but
be
you know
agreement.
what, Rod? The more I look at these things, the more I realise that the only true important rating is yours.
That's right.
Yours, because that's going to fuel everything, isn't it? Yeah. Certainly a well-written article or a photo and so on, that can have some impact and might influence, might get you there. But once you're there and you've played it, where in your mind it slots.
Exactly.
And we see this down in, with the Cape Wickham and the Ocean Dunes. People, it's a long way to go, and there's a little bit of logistics involved. And so
part of the appeal, I think, of some of these modern places is the pilgrimage to get there.
Correct.
The suffering you do to get there, to get the reward at the end is.
But the thing is, part of the interesting stimulation is that people won't go there and play Ocean Dunes alone. They won't play Cape Wickham alone. In fact, cleverly, people say we're going to play Kari as well, 109, 10, 111-year-old, one of the best 9-hole courses in the world. Let's play all three. And you speak to these people, and every now and again you'll say, some people, I prefer the little 9-holer. Interesting. Not many, but I've had that said to me. Others will say, oh, no, Cape Wickham. Look at Cape Wickham. And others will say, oh, no,
it's Ocean Dune.
Ocean Dune. There's more golf at Ocean Dunes. Cape Wickham will knock us out instantaneously, no doubt. Ocean Dunes may or may not. But some people are saying there's more golfability, more golf, quote-unquote golf. So I'm not here to say which is which, but I am pointing out that is just further evidence that the only rating that counts is your own.
The specifics aren't really important, are they? It's the discussion that is an enjoyable part. Any trip to Barnbougle Dunes, it's guaranteed
to stimulate. Yes,
that what you will do, and it's the same at Bandon Dunes and you sit in the bar afterwards and argue about which is better.
Yeah, both. Not just is Lost Farm better than Barnbougle, but within Barnbougle and Lost Farm, which is your favourite hole? Which are the best holes?
Exactly
which
right.
Could have done better?
One of the great appeals of golf. It stimulates the mind, doesn't it? And it stimulates the mind because you're still talking about it after you've stopped doing it.
And that's golf. I mean, in other pursuits, you can't wait to get away, like, say, the dishes, using the hoovering around. I've just used that to Google, to hoover. You can't wait for these pursuits to finish, but not golf. So getting back to ratings and magazines and podcasts, surely that's one of the benefits and one of the best things about them is that they're guaranteed to stimulate conversation,
discussion,
keep things on the boil, and part of the whole marketing machination. But
I want to come to a discussion about modern media and its place and how we might be going with golf course age. But back to getting some information about you. So you started life in Western Victoria, and professionally, you were in chemistry.
Yeah.
Which feels like an awful long way from being a golf course architecture book publisher.
It's a long way, yes.
How does that journey take place? And could you... this is often a silly question. I suppose you couldn't possibly, but I think you'll get the point of what I'm trying to say. Could you ever have imagined at any point during your career in chemistry, could you have ever pictured yourself being a golf course architecture book publisher as a way to fill your days and make
the answer is no. I gravitated towards it. I tried to put two and two together. It took a while. That I love golf and I always enjoyed writing. I was not a great student at school because I was always daydreaming about golf, so I never ever bore down. I never really did the hard yards. But strange enough, I did very well at English, and that I later reflected on that and put the two together, love of golf and the love of English, the English language and writing. And then later in life it came to me that I don't want to be a rep on the road, and then I was a national sales manager. And chemistry and pharmacology, anatomy, physiology and disease states and all the new drugs. You know, there was... it was a very big role, and
sounds like a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. Training the new reps to go out there and be with either pharmacists or specialists, GPs, and so on and so on. But no, I was keen to get out. I had a good long career within the pharmaceutical industry, and I retired approximately the age of 39, 40, knowing I wouldn't be retiring. I'd get straight on and do
something. What you wanted to do,
yes.
A second career, essentially. It must have required quite a leap of faith, though.
It was, but if I could just reveal something in the intimacy of this little cathedral we have here, Rod.
It's a beautiful room. We're here at Long Island Country Club. I think you remember the National Long Island. It's a beautiful place.
Really
a lovely clubhouse, and we're in the boardroom. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's got a lot of
and thank you
old
to
world
the people
appeal
for letting us play.
It's very decent of Long Island, the National, to do that. I should actually confide that the first book I ever did, Links Golf: The Inside Story, because of my love of, I actually did on company time. Which,
nice.
You know, I've gotten over the guilt of that many years later to reveal that I'd be in a hospital or a GP clinic, and there'd be a hell of a queue. And I had this choice. I could either do some work towards my first book or fill in a report, a weekly report of business activity on territory. And so that became very obvious that I put that to one side. So I kept nibbling away. For the last year that I was on the road, I nibbled away to the point that when I retired from the industry, I virtually had this book ready to go. I had this manuscript, Links Golf: The Inside Story. So it was 1999. But at that stage, I'd already had 3 pilgrimages all over Britain.
To sort of feed the fever.
3, 4, 5, 6 week duration. Sometimes with my wife, and other times without.
With your mistress golf.
my mistress golf.
That's
yes.
Right. So are you telling me, Paul, that not only is an awful lot of golf literature read in doctors' waiting rooms, but some has been written in doctors' waiting rooms as well?
That's what I'm here to tell you, Rod. Yes.
What a revelation that is. The whole thing's been worth it if just for that piece of information alone.
Yes.
That is fantastic stuff. As you're talking there about some of the terms you were using, business reports, on the road and the travel and this and that, it's very dry.
It's very dry, yeah.
It's most people's experience of work.
It's conservative and it's pharmaceutical and it's business, yeah.
It is very business. It's ties and formalities and handshakes and dinners and conferences and all of that sort of thing, you know. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how business looks. But it must have required quite a leap of faith to go from that, which is very safe. The appeal of it is it's extremely safe.
Like the public service.
The money comes into the bank every week. You know it's going to come in. You know how much there is and you know what you can do. Then you can plan around that. To leap from that to essentially an unknown. I'm going to become an author and then later a publisher.
It was a big trick.
What happened internally there for you? That's a bigger decision than most people would probably appreciate.
It was a huge thing because I went from the
what did your wife say, which is what every bloke out there is wondering? How did you sell it to her?
No, that's right. Well, actually, I must have learned my selling skills quite well to be able to pass that through to Penny. But, it was a leap into the unknown because not only was I going from that to editing, writing, publishing, I actually had to teach myself to be in small business. I know small business can be anything from no
podcasting to
right up to, is it 20 or 30 before we become?
It's quite a few. It's a lot more than either of us would like to be.
Let me just say that I was in a very small business, and so this business with ASIC and registering and forms and
tax,
ABNs
GST, and BAS statements.
BAS statements, and so it relied on me. Here I was thinking, well, hang on, it's one thing to, let's be honest, when people work for companies, and I'd say particularly in the pharmaceutical, if they're putting in 40 hours a week, there might be an hour here or there that, perhaps people skive off. And,
of course. You'd hope. You'd drab old world if they're not.
Yes. But I was thinking, well, hang on, that's then, this is now, this is my own company. I've got to be a bit careful here.
There's no skiving off when you're doing it for yourself.
And you know what, Rod? Here's another revelation. I think I went too much the other way.
Too much work.
I was perhaps a little bit concerned that, given the opportunity, this skiving off thing, that might become a little bit habitual. So I went the other way, and I'm only now just thinking about that 20 years later. Time to slow down a little bit. So,
could you have got here if you hadn't been that way?
No, I wouldn't have. And
did it feel like work?
It never felt. See, that's one of the reasons.
That's the danger, isn't it? It doesn't feel like work.
What I do, there's a real blurred line that having the business in the house with where you don't have to get dressed up in a suit and tie, you don't have to walk through the door, you don't have to. Check the photocopier and all this kind of stuff. So you just can keep at it the whole time, meaning late nights, very early morning starts. So the thing is, I should have known that there was no worry that I'd be inclined to skive off. I should have been better prepared for the fact that, if anything, I'd burn the candle at both ends. Yep. And I know Penny, she keeps an eye on that and pulls me back into the line.
The work from home thing, I do it myself too, is you're never really at work and you're never really at home.
No.
You live in this state that's between the two.
Yes.
And most of what you read, and I've never managed to do it, suggests that you have an area of the house that is the office, that you go to that at a set time each day and you work for your time that you allotted for work. And you can work long hours if you want to, but that there is a time to arrive and there's a time to leave, and that room is only for work, that it's not for something else as well. I've never managed to do it, but I know exactly what you're describing there. That you never really... And it's okay, but for people around you, that can be quite difficult.
It's challenging for them.
Because you're never really at home.
You're never really at home.
That's a problem.
No, that's right, yes. So, I can relate to what you're saying, and you've experienced it over good many years yourself. So I think the main thing is to be aware of it and keep trying to do better and not shortchange your partner or your family. We don't have children, although we're fond of saying that we had 2 miniature schnauzers for 14 years. Pepper and Heidi, they were the nearest things that we came to. We were on IVF for a good decade, and we gave it a right royal tilt, and we threw the whole thing into it.
What impact does that have on a person, Paul? And everything that comes with the work and the change of perspective that goes from a safe job to let's publish a golf book. Is there a perspective change in there?
It had a massive impact, because it was the impetus for two things. Penny was a highly regarded classroom primary school teacher, and that was the impetus for her the catalyst to say, well, without children, perhaps can devote myself to higher office, and she became an excellent principal over the last 10 to 15 years of her working career, and a highly regarded principal at Knox Gardens. For myself, it threw me further into golf, and it helped make me realise that I would be leaving the pharmaceutical industry, helped me realise I'd be doing more in golf, in the golf publishing world and golf writing. So it was very impactful when the door was finally slammed. See, for 10 years, there's always the hope that on the next cycle, on the next time we do it, we might have luck. But of course, one day down the track, everyone who goes through IVF will have a success or a degree of success, but we're in the early days where success rates are in the 10 to 15% range. So I applaud my wife Penny for going through that. It's always harder on the woman because they're the ones taking the medicines. And
is it something that ever comes to a resolution, Paul? Do you ever resolve that? I wonder. It's a big thing in a life, isn't it? The whole point of being here, it would seem, biologically and scientifically, is to procreate.
Yes. I think we've come to a resolution, and we realised, but it was still painful. It lingered for many years, and it fueled us to do other things and to work hard, and perhaps in hindsight bury our heads in work, but we've made peace on it. And
I don't mean to pry.
No, that's fine.
I'm interested in what sort of shapes people and helps them because common sense, and you know this, you've been in a proper business, common sense says to you that the dumbest thing in the world you could do is leave a well-paid job and go and start publishing golf books. Yeah. That's crazy. Nobody in the world is going to give you the go-ahead to do that and say, that's a good idea, Paul.
It would fail any business model.
Of course. Yeah, you've done it and done it successfully.
Yes.
Which is both wonderfully, thumb to the nose at those who would say otherwise, but there's reasons, motivations why people do those things, isn't there?
Yes. I think I was motivated by the fact that I had something to offer and I wanted to be involved. But also, I think if I'm truly honest with myself, from the age of 5 or 6, I always wanted to be a golf pro. I wanted to be a golf pro. Well, actually, that's not strictly true. I wanted to be a lead guitarist.
Right. It's an eclectic mix of desires.
A lead guitarist or a golf professional.
You could have been John Daley.
Well, just the addition of the letter E.
Yeah, that's right.
And no, the thing is, he's got 6 more addictions than I have. We won't go through all.
He needs to be a golf pro to afford them.
Yeah.
Nobody else in work can afford the sorts of things
Dear old John. I'll never forget watching him out for the President's Cup, and it was the days when Sandringham across the road was the practice, and there he was hitting these balls. I'd never seen balls hit with such ferocity.
What an extraordinary talent. What an amazing natural raw talent.
He was a raw talent.
I recall seeing him hit a bunker shot on the first at Huntingdale from the bunker side green on the left.
On the left, yeah.
Which was just death.
Was the pin hard left as well?
I think so. Yeah. And from memory, the ball never got more than a couple of inches off the green, but it hit the green and just skidded to a stop 3 feet behind the hole. And it wasn't an accident. It was the most amazing shot I think I've ever seen. Yeah. And he just had that. We all think of the long hitting, but what a magnificent pair of hands he had around the green.
Magnificent pair of hands, and we saw that in, was it 95? Yeah. 1995, and
the lag
putting from 80-90,
beautiful.
He's lagging it up to a foot, and beautiful free,
lovely.
A non-mechanical, free-flowing mechanism, his wonderful swing, and if you think at one end, some of the. Well, actually, no, I won't go down that path.
Let's not. We didn't come together to talk about players. I'm guessing I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask: has it been what you expected it to be, publishing golf books?
It's been very satisfying. It's been really satisfying.
Because it can't have been easy.
It's never been easy. There's no money in it. Otherwise, I think more people would be doing it. You know yourself, the level of detail required, checking, researching, writing, editing, proofing, and then checking again, fixing things all the way up until the printer presses the button.
And you inevitably get the book, the finished book, and the first thing you find on page 1 is a mistake that you've missed in the 52 previous readings.
Correct. I'm of the opinion, Rod, that there's never been, certainly there's never been a golf book yet written, published and produced without an error. And that might apply to all books of any genre.
Every written article, there's no question about that.
Yeah, I think I take the attitude that given there will be an error in there, to try and get this to market with the least amount of errors. The task of it would be possible to do a golf book without an error, but the proofreading stage might take 5 years. Who's going to do that for a single book?
Of course.
It's not going to happen. So,
and it would need more than one person. Yeah. The reality of proofreading is if you've missed it the first time and the second time, you can read it 100 times, you'll never see it.
Correct. You won't see it.
You just won't see it. Yeah. It's already passed through there. It's given as okay in the brain.
And then there's the other mistake that gets in the golf books, is that on the surface it appears it's spelled correctly, the year's correct, but the actual detail's incorrect. It was not person A, it was person B. But through that club's history, the writer of the first history will have incorrectly researched it, and then there'll be an update 30 or 40 years later for the 75th or even the centenary. And so a mistake can be inadvertently passed down through the line over a century to the fact that it's law, but the fact is it never happened.
And then, of course, when you reveal that the truth is it never happened, now you're the pariah.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Because you're not running the company line now. No. You're going against the grain. It can cause all sorts of... Golf history is its own, as with all history, is its own sometimes toxic world, isn't it? People get very passionate and worked up about things and make accusations about agendas and all sorts of things that may or may not be there, but either way.
I think, to everyone's credit involved in golf publishing, the aim is to try and get them pretty right.
As good as. Have you been surprised by... what sorts of reactions have you had? What were your expectations for the first of the series of 7 books? Perhaps might have been the benchmark. What did you think would happen? And what have you thought about? What sort of feedback have you had, and how has that made you feel about
the first episode of Golf Architects was purely dipping my toe in the water. I had no idea that this would keep going. I thought it was a good idea at the time to try and present similar articles from different viewpoints, but very importantly not...
So for those not familiar, so the books are essentially a collection of essays by golf architects.
Golf architects and golf writers, and in some instances neither, but golf enthusiasts who have a passion for golf course architecture. And anyway, the idea was definitely not to assemble 40 or 50 essays that were all singing out of the same hymn book that would reinforce a certain idea. In the name of the title, Golf Architecture, A Worldwide Perspective, I wanted to capture and present varying viewpoints of different models around the world, big scale, small scale, and also introduce Line Mortensen from Scandinavia, who worked for Marnock and Gaunt Architecture in England and other firms, but she broke out and anyway, so that struck me as fascinating that there'd be a female. Everyone knows dear old Alice, sadly passed away, Alice Dye and others, but I thought that was great. As a young girl who could be doing other things, she put her passion into architecture. So I wanted to capture her thoughts on the industry. But that's just one example. And then we had Pete Dye and the famous architects of the time. This is going back 2000. What
was the response like from them when you approached some of those big-name people and said, would you mind doing this?
I was shocked. My inclination was to pay these people, but because I'd only very recently just started in publishing, there was no money in the kitty to pay anyone.
Pay them with what?
And actually, I broached it with some people. How much do you want for this article? And they said, "Oh no, there's no charge. You're actually helping to promote our business and the industry." And precious few people at that time were promoting the industry globally because it was not seen as a sexy thing. Mm-hmm. And the golf magazines had very little content on architecture, generally, for obvious reason. They need to sell magazines, so they were equipment oriented and
instruction equipment. We know what sells golf magazines.
You know what sells. So I think there was great appreciation from the marketplace. So all of a sudden I started getting unsolicited essays, and that was... I said to Penny, this is really starting to take off. All of a sudden it became obvious to me that this time next year, which was then back in 2002, we'll do Volume 2. And that was bigger and much bigger and more essays and more photographs. And then, of course, Volume 3, I had the opportunity to put St Andrews Beach on the front cover, which I did. And it's been that way ever since. So Volume 4, Volume 5, Volume 6, and now Volume 7 I'm working on at the moment, and that'll be coming out in July the 1st this year.
I feel like, Paul, listening to you talk there, and I feel like the response from the architects is this. You didn't get into this to sell books.
No. Oh, no.
Doesn't feel like that's your motivation.
No, it's not.
And it doesn't feel like Pete Dye's motivation for submitting something when you asked him was to promote his business. What is it there's an altruistic thing going on in the background, isn't there?
There is a thing, yeah. In fact, every book loses money. There you go. I want to do my bit for golf course architecture, and this is one way I feel I can do it. I certainly don't deserve any pats on the back because, no one's leading me by the bridle and saying, have a sip of that water.
That's for others to decide.
I'm doing it of my own free will, and I'm getting so much enjoyment, and that I think in time, if I and others keep hammering away, maybe the tide may turn where down the track there might be 10 people per club globally that have a bit of an interest in this and can see what's going on in their favourite playground and some of their other playgrounds. So, certainly there's not a money aspect. Yeah, I could have put my whatever talents I do have to other uses and possibly skived off on a regular basis and
put an addition on the house.
Addition on the house.
A putting green in the backyard you could have installed.
More
with
holidays
the
for
money
Penny Knight.
More holidays for you and Penny to places.
Yes, but having said that, we did have a holiday recently in Canada and Alaska, as recently as last September. And Penny said, no, you'll need to play a bit of golf. I said, oh, no. We're going away for 5 weeks. So, all right, one game. And so at the National, we're reciprocal rights with Capilano Country Club in just north of Vancouver, in Vancouver. And that was a marvellous experience, playing one of Stanley Thompson's most revered golf courses. But as it turned out, I ended up playing 2 extra games, Jasper and Banff, 2 more Stanley Thompson. So that was... Opportunities arose during our travels and we stayed at Banff and Jasper, and they were put into the itinerary. So I feel absolutely blessed to have played 3 of the best courses I've ever played, and given.
See, you are making money. The books are making money.
Well, you're
2 rounds of golf up on what you might have otherwise been if there'd been no book. I must say, it strikes me, Penny's a very clever woman. She knows you're not going 5 weeks without playing golf without being unbearable.
That's right.
So for her own sake, she's ensuring that there's some golf in there, because otherwise you'll be...
bear with a
we're in the home of Stanley Thompson. I must play some golf.
Bear with a sore head. And we saw bears. We were there during rutting season, and we observed golfers coming up the 18th at Banff having to pick the balls up and say, that's the end of golf, halfway towards the green on the 18th, because the males were eyeing off each other from 50 metres, and the hesitant does were on yonder hillock thinking that they might be coming our way very shortly. And I'm
sitting here mouth agape, but of course it reminds me that just a couple of weeks ago we did a podcast with UK golf guy, UK traveller who came over here with and they had the same reaction about snakes.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I accept that there's snakes on a golf course. It doesn't bother me. I imagine Canadians just accept, well, there's bears on the golf course. Sometimes you pick your ball up and you leave. Yes. And we're from the outside going, my goodness, how can you live that way? But I suppose...
Yeah. That's all part of the environment. That's part of,
What joyful.
Yeah, it's joyful.
That's lovely, isn't it?
It's lovely.
To stop because there's bears about?
Bears. I think it's lovely, yeah.
A little bit scary, but it
is nice.
It's a lovely thing. What do you think drives that, Paul, I think it comes back to the thing about golf, that wanting to make a contribution. There's no good reason.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I think underpinning a lot of this also is the fact that, in hindsight, I should have worked harder on my game. I would have liked to have been a better player and travelled the world and participated in tournaments. But I was ignorant. I didn't know the work involved, what was required, and the single-mindedness. And I think that was the lesson I learned, is that if I was going to go into this publishing, editing, writing thing, I really had to be single-minded, and so that that outrated any concern of money.
This is your golf career. essentially. This is the replacement for your golf.
This is the surrogate. I think there's a bit in that.
Surrogate,
I mean, nice word, yeah. It's all still evolving with me, so I can't be too. But I think I've replaced the lack of good golf with and the career with the writing and the publishing. Yeah.
It's two passions, isn't it? There's golf,
yes,
and there's writing and / books.
Yeah, because and here's this interesting allied topic is that the golf professional that gets too caught up in the architecture, he can't be potent.
To the detriment of his game.
He's going to go off because the ruthless nature of the top pros. The ruthless nature of the top pros, when the architect, it's all, down the middle and then onto the green and hold that putt and just getting further and further under par. We're not here for a haircut and to admire why this hole goes to the right. It should have gone to the left.
It's an unnecessary distraction, isn't it?
It's
a damaging distraction for a good player.
Yes. But
something dawns on me. We often hear this: the smaller the ball, the better the writing. So in golf, that's fantastic for us because they don't get any smaller. Are we being altogether too smug about that in golf, or is there some truth to it, do you think?
The smaller the ball.
The smaller the ball, the better the writing. It's an age-old saying in sports writing. Cricket writing is better than soccer writing.
Yeah. I think the best writing I've ever read is cricket writing. I think golf writing is some of the best writing I've ever heard. I don't say myself. People like Shackelford and Brad Klein and Herbert Warren Wind, the great Bernard Darwin, who he's the big daddy of all writers. He's the yardstick. Bernardo, great grandson of Charles Darwin. So he had a heck of big shoes to fill, and he himself has become very famous in his field, Bernard Darwin. But yes, I think it's the smaller the ball. That's right. The golf ball smaller than the soccer ball. I think there's truth in it. Whoever came up with that is, I think,
was probably a golf writer.
Got it spot on.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I don't know who did. I've just always been aware of it.
You've given me a research project.
Always been aware of it. Well, ask Mike Clayton. He might know. Because he's one who often.
So I'm wondering if whoever's written the treatise on marbles must have done it.
Somewhere out there is the masterpiece.
I want that book.
And it's about marble.
Yeah. But also I think golf is an unfathomable riddle, like the deepest ocean, that cannot be solved, and therefore there's always,
There's always more.
There's always more that needs to be reported on and etc.
You've led me neatly to the two final things that I wanted to cover with you, and they're kind of related. We'll take the first one second, but I'll tell you what it is so you can think about it while you're answering the first. And that is perhaps what is the future for books. But the first question is about the new media age that we live in, the digital age. I'm not sure how active you are on Twitter or some of the other social media channels, but there's a real bubble, which I'm a part of. So it can look bigger than it really is, and I'm not sure what the reality of it is. There's a real bubble of people and golfers worldwide, this sort of loose band of brothers with similar ideas to a lot of what we've been talking about today. Golf as part of the community, design as one of the more important elements of golf, rather than some of the logistical and economic things that might be considered. Do you sense that from out? Are you in that bubble? I don't see you on Twitter. No. Are you in that bubble, or do you observe it from outside? What are your thoughts about that and the potential for that? It feels like there's quite a few young people involved in that.
I think it's great.
Extremely encouraging.
Firstly, I'm not involved in it because I'm so, being T-Rex, a dinosaur of some description, I'm so committed to the old way because I've got ongoing projects. But I do acknowledge that as time goes on, the shift will be made, and I will join that bubble, and I am aware of it.
You're very welcome, Paul. And
I think you're right.
It's a lot more fun than it might seem from the outside.
No,
it's a wonderful place to be.
I'm aware of it. I don't even have a Twitter account. I'm curious when I receive... what do you call it? I get emails.
Yes.
Look, I can read the top line. And I thought, I'd love to read what's below that top line. I'm teased. And so there's been many good articles I haven't read because I can't get into them. So, look, I need to make that change. And I'm aware of it's very big in Canada and America and getting bigger and bigger all the time in Australia. And
podcasts are a part of that too. What we're doing here now is
it's
the opportunities that opens. How many how often would you have expected to sit down with somebody for perhaps an hour or more in a formal interview situation and talked about this stuff? Well, it would have been rare.
It hasn't happened that often. Maybe twice in the last 20 years.
You've done a couple of Golf Club Atlas interviews, I know, yes. Which are they're more a written thing, aren't they?
More
written questions than you write.
That's right. So I think I applaud it. I think it's a good thing, the podcast and the new media focus, because it's a sign of the time. It's going with the times.
And it's discussion,
it's
isn't it?
Discussion,
That's the key.
it's content.
It's talk.
It's live, it's real. And it's a concession to the fact that the print media, has, to some degree, the best days are in that rear view mirror.
Not to some degree, certainly with general.
More than some degree.
In niche markets like magazines, golf magazines, interestingly, they're still quite healthy. But it's the niche nature of, I think, it is the key to that. If you owned a daily newspaper, you would have been very nervous for the last 20 years.
Correct. Yeah,
it's been an extraordinary change. That's my background, and that business has changed. It's unrecognisable now. To what it was. That there's other issues about that, for the future of journalism and its role in society. The only newspapers ever trained journalists in the past. That's been the reality of it. TV and radio never has.
Yes.
They've got nothing to do with what we're talking about. What about the future of books, Paul?
The books will have already changed, and there's more e-books on the market.
Are they as satisfying? Maybe it's generational. I don't find them as satisfying to read as a printed word on a page.
No, you can't beat the bringing in all the senses that a golf book or a book of any description will have, coffee table or non, a tangible touching, the smell of it, the touch of it, the smell of it, the look of it, the feel of it, the weight of it, the GSM, the grams per square metre, the thickness of the paper.
Good paper's a thing of beauty, isn't it?
It is.
Really high quality
really high paper.
It's a tactile experience to touch it and turn the pages.
It is. And publishing decisions such as at one end of the scale we have, say, the white or yellow pages or the Bible, which has got, very low GSM, 10, 15 or 20, and yet up the other end, say 400 GSM, an art book on Monet or Rembrandt, where the pages are so thick you can barely flick them.
It's almost cardboard.
And so, there's a lot of decision-making going into the thickness of the paper. But, it's dear, it's labour-intensive. So I see the new media, the digital world, which is not new. It's new to me, and I'm being it's becoming more new to me, and I'm hearing more about it from a mate of mine, Robbie Williamson, who's a member of the National, and
indeed he is
my favourite train driver.
Yes,
and we have a chat, and
I deal with him on Twitter all the time. Terrific fellow.
And Robert was the one who actually said, have you met Rod? You must have a chat to Rod. He was a bit of a catalyst in that regard.
Thank you, Rob. I'll thank him when I see him in a few weeks' time.
So I know Rob's very active, and of course, being a train driver, he's not always driving. There's downtime, and he's very active. And some of my friends are also active, and I want to jump in and contribute, but I'm so busy doing the traditional stuff that I can't be in two places at once.
The wonderful way to start, Paul, is to follow.
The
great thing about social media is that you don't have to contribute. And I like Twitter over the others. I don't do Facebook at all, and I'm not Instagram. There's some fabulous photography on Instagram, but it's one that I've never... But the wonderful nature of Twitter is you choose who you follow. And you get their content and content that they have liked or retweeted. And that's a wonderful way to get started. And at some point, if you do that, at some point you're going to see one that demands a reaction, be it either, are you kidding? That's an absurd statement. Or you've just articulated something I've had in mind for 25 years and could never put into words, so thank you for that. That's what will happen. That's how and then you'll be away. And then someone will respond to you, and then you'll be in a conversation.
And get right onto it, yes.
And you'll be a part of it. But there is definitely that sort of bubble forming. So I guess we're saying, to me it feels like there'll be a future for books in as much as they offer something that you can't get from digital.
So that's a bit going back to Tim Liddy, how he put on his head this business about slow play. That's a good thing. The escape that is going to take you so long, and that's a good thing. And so maybe what you've done there is put a new feel on books. Is that because it's all digital, they may actually, I'm not saying make a comeback, but they may become more appreciated.
It becomes a premium product, doesn't it?
Yes. The two can coexist.
Oh, absolutely, of course they can.
And really, the astute publisher, all he or she does is really just adjust the print run in line with the mood. Read the mood.
Has it grown, Paul? So has book 6 sold more than book 1? Has the interest in the topic grown in the time that you've been involved in publishing books
question.
about it?
It has, but not significantly.
Not enough.
Not significantly.
To wave the flag and say we're getting there.
Not yet. No, it's been a noticeable improvement in the print runs, but not significant enough to say I'm going to go out and I need staff. I need 2 or 3 assistants. So at this stage, I tackle the whole kit and caboodle and process everything. So that'd be nice if maybe that might only happen through more association with the digital world and more blogging. I mean, I know I need to start blogging.
Oh, it's not need. People tell you, you need to do this. Well, you clearly don't. You're a clearly happy person without it, so you don't need it.
I'm very happy without it.
Yeah, but there are certainly things that are worth being involved in, and it's the international scope. I feel like to me is one of the most. Rob's down at the National and tweeting from there, and he's tweeting to people who are in America and Scotland all at the same time. Yeah. And it's a wonderful, and it really is a conversation, that Twitter thing where you tweet something and somebody replies and responds. It's not always to the good, but it is discussion.
All bets are off, because it's uncontrolled, isn't it? And that's part of the appeal.
There's an anonymous factor which can be problematic. So people, when they're anonymous, feel free to say things they would never say if their name was attached to it, or they'd say.
So they have they have a catchy name, say a fried egg or a.
You've heard of the fried egg then? Young Andy, who's doing fabulous work in promoting golf course architecture as being important. And he does that wonderful podcast series with Tom Doak, which is essentially architecture for beginners. And that's important, because getting started, if you're interested, even if you're stridently interested in it can be quite hard to find the information to teach yourself what some of this stuff is about.
I think that's a great thing is Tom's doing there.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. What next then for you, Paul? We did, of course, we touched on it briefly. Your most recent publishing effort was Keith Cutton's book.
That's right.
It feels like a very important tome to me in the grand scheme of golf course architecture as its contribution and its important part in the game, and understanding why and how various
factors. I think it assumes importance on a few fronts, but for me, one of the main reasons it assumes some importance is that cleverly Keith Cutton has made a link with architecture. Has evolved. Everyone knows that, but it has not evolved in isolation.
In a bubble.
It has evolved as a reactionary stage to economic and social impacts. What's happening, and global events, to wars, to currency rates, to unemployment rates, to social trends, mores, and as far as I can see, he's the first person ever to have articulated this, and he did so for the first time 5 or 6 years ago in a thesis that he presented, and he got the requisite pass and pat on the back, and got into architecture. In fact, it was already in architecture, and he sat on this thesis for a good 5 years, and then it suddenly struck him that, hang on, this thesis is interesting. There's some good points in there, and I think he realised that this is virgin territory, some of the stuff that he was uncovering. Perhaps it deserves to hit a wider market, become better known. And so he approached me, and I was flattered that he did so. And
I wonder if you Google golf course architecture publishers, I wonder how many names pop up.
I've never.
There wouldn't be a lot. I imagine you would have been fairly close to the top of the list, which is a feather in your cap. But in all truth,
in the old days,
if you're Keith and you've got that, who do you go to?
Yeah, well, look.
If you've ever heard of you, then you're the obvious choice as far as I can see.
Well, it just shows what an outlier I am. But the others have said there's no money in this. I'm running for cover.
Maybe.
The penny hasn't dropped. But so I looked at this thesis and I thought this has got real potential. Now, one of the great books ever done was called The Golf Course by Geoffrey Cornish and Ronald Whitten, which in approximately, I'll be a year or two out here, around about 1980, 82, they attempted to bear public all the different eras of golf course architecture, who have been some of the major players.
There's a directory at the back of that book, is there not? What courses have been designed by who? Yeah.
And also there's a page in there, or several pages, that look at the lineage. For instance, old Tom Morris, who apprenticed with him, who then broke away, who was influenced by old Tom, and it goes down. And then in some ways, everyone has to some degree been influenced by somebody who is influenced by somebody who was influenced by old Tom.
Yeah,
anyway, so that was a wonderful achievement, and Geoffrey Cornish particularly, who died just short of 100. I think it was 98.
That's a good knock.
98, and he was very scholarly type, as is Ronald Whitten. They put together something we thought was very good. But Keith obviously bought it. It was one of the first books Keith bought, and he thought there could be some differences, new information that they didn't cover, perhaps some areas that could be covered slightly better. And, of course, there's all the new information that wasn't around then. So we looked at it and said, let's give it a go. Let's give it a go. So
it's done pretty well, hasn't it? I think it's probably surprised Keith a little bit. He was nervous about it. I know that. We had him on our other podcast, and he was nervous.
Yeah, the first book is really hard. It's a leap. It's a big, scary adventure.
You swing from we're not going to be able to keep up with demand to not one person's going to buy this book, I imagine, and both of those emotions happen in the space of about a second and a half.
Yeah, that's right.
And you're 100% convinced of each as you have the thought.
That's right. And it's one thing for him to have had personal convictions about architecture and who he admired and who he perhaps did not, but then to go into print and lay that bare it's not just the money. It costs a lot of money to do it, and paying someone across around the other world.
There's a personal stake, though, isn't it? Your reputation, credibility, all of those things are at risk.
And he was, because he was mentored by the great Roddy Whitman, who's probably the least known great architect. He's been invisible, and unlike some, he's completely shunned publicity, but he's one of the greats. And of course, he was mentored by Bill Corr, as was Keith. So anyway, Keith, this is part of a thank you for Keith's mentors to show them that, look, I did take in some information along the way. Thank you, mentors. But there's some new information here as well. So he looked to say who are the influential architects, the writers, influential developers, and I think he did a good job.
Two questions to finish up. That evolution idea of golf not developing in a bubble but responding to all sorts of other market forces, I feel like we still see that today. That's been the success of Barnbougle and Bandon and Cabot. There's a demand for that.
Yes.
Ergo, we supply that.
Yes.
So that was not really a question, I guess. That was more a statement. And thankfully, you've agreed with me, so I don't have to edit that out. So I was correct about that, which is nice. But more importantly, it begs the question, what's next?
What is next, yeah.
Do you give this much thought? Because we're in an era of, to really dumb it down, you say beautiful blowout bunkers and very bold and wild-looking aesthetic golf course with good strategic bones.
I think, I've given it some thought. The highly organic, bare bones, post-Sandhill era, which has spawned many things in remote, invariably coastal. Nebraska is not coastal, but of course it's dunes. It's dunes, and it's in in a region that has I think one of the largest aquifers in the world. So I don't know, there maybe was a sea there many moons ago, but invariably, and I know this from reading Keith's book and being intimately involved in it, there will come a time when that's on the nose. There will be a new wave that people will be a harsh reaction away from big lacy bunkers with edges and organic and minimalist. You know, that won't be around forever. So what is next? I think sustainability, shorter courses. What I'm really hoping for is the realisation that in time the club expectation from the average club golfer of having green, verdant stripes is totally unsupported. You can't be supported. It costs a lot of money.
And resources.
It costs a lot of money, a lot of resources.
That are finite.
It creates unrealistic expectations in agronomy. And we've got people that can't break 100 making comments like, oh, I got a bad lie out there today. You know, I mean, this is getting a long way away from the old St Andrews, model and the old British way. We go out and hit the ball. You hit it again, you find it, your lie might be okay, you'll have varying stances. But, the push to equate better conditioned courses with better courses is anathema to me. I'll never buy into it. To me, it's the quality of the architecture, the way the thing has been constructed. Maintenance can come and go. I won't be talking about golf courses in terms of their appearance. I think water's okay. We're going to struggle with water, and architects have to be really, really on the ball. So
golfers and committees and the entire game needs to get with that program.
Yeah. See, I made
dire predictions about water.
Yeah.
I read one from the UK the other week that by 2050 they'll be underwater stress in the UK.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I know that's
think about that
in the UK industries.
Yeah. Think about that.
So
that's madness.
when people would go to Kingston Heath, they'd see all those beautiful browns and greens and all the intermingling and the slightly rustic look and the native roughs. It's quite magnificent, and yet people go there and sometimes say, "Oh, gee, it was really quite brown."
Terrible condition.
If they've come off the National, which is incredibly green all year round, regardless of, they can put a Kingston Heath down, and I've heard that quite a bit recently. It's not an informed comment, and so, but it's symptomatic that club golfers are reared on the fact that the fairways have to be perfect, the bunkers have to be perfect. Well, perhaps that's, if you think of that opinion in all clubs around the world, maybe that's one of the reasons why the game's under a lot of stress.
And is over there.
Yeah, imagine that on the ground crew and the superintendent and the board level and all the equipment they have to buy to keep fueling unrealistic expectations. So I think that's next. Somehow getting across to club golfers that if you love golf, if you want to make it, if you always want your golf course to be there, we have to have a complete 360 turnaround on what is fair and reasonable to present to you.
Beautifully circular way you've brought this around to an end by opening the final can of worms, Paul. There's a 2-hour discussion in that topic alone, but we won't delve into it. All I can do is thank you.
Thank you, Rod.
Really, for taking the time. It's been magnificent to chat to you, and I hope our listeners
I've enjoyed it very much.
Enjoyed it as much as I have.
Thank you, Rod. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and thank you.
I've been called a lot of things, Paul. No. Never have I been called a gentleman or a scholar.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Rod.
There is so much to chew on in that interview, and what a delight it was for me personally to have the opportunity to sit and talk about the game with Paul. I felt like his passion for every facet of golf shone through brightly, and I hope that you enjoyed his insights as much as I did. If you're enjoying the podcast, tell your friends and fellow golfers, and make sure to let us know what you think via all the avenues that I've listed in the show notes. That wraps up episode 5 of The Thing About Golf, but make sure to come back next time when we meet one of only a handful of PGA Life members and one of the great protectors of the game in this country, Tom Moore.